Indiana's Attorney General recently had a meeting with Donald Trump, and during this meeting, he proposed a few solutions, potential solutions on school campuses in case another mass shooter attempts to carry out what just tragically happened in Parkland, Florida. Now, interestingly enough, and perhaps unsurprisingly, Donald Trump had a very difficult time comprehending what this Attorney General was attempting to tell him, because the solutions didn't include armed teachers. Take a look.
The school created a model for security. And in the security, not only do we have bulletproof doors, bulletproof glass, we have containment zones. When the students are in the classrooms, the doors are locked. So we don't have to go up and lock them from the outside. And Mayor, we talked about that earlier. That was a concern you had and how that's done. This is all done automatically. The school is wired directly, securely to the Sheriff's Department 10 miles away. So the Sheriff's Department can monitor in real time what's occurring. Each teacher has a key fob so that when something occurs, they can communicate effectively and immediately with someone off-site. And the most—
Do you have anybody inside with a gun that can take on the man that's right outside the door? That, by the way, can shoot right through the steel doors as they did in your school? Well, those bullets went right through those steel doors like they were butter.
You know, let's watch the rest of it.
Okay, all right, then we'll comment.
That's a part of what's necessary, but I can tell you this: what else they have are countermeasures. Countermeasures that can be employed from the Sheriff's Department within seconds to contain the attacker and, in a sense, turn the attack on. That's a critical piece. I would invite you to come to Shelby County.
I just don't know what that means. Honestly, I don't know what that means.
Well, I can tell you what it means. When you're in the hallway, if you have an active shooter in the hall and he's going around and he's looking for targets, we've got the doors blocked, we've got it locked up, somebody's monitoring, and for example, they have smoke canisters that can come in and blind the shooter, which detracts him from the his target.
All right.
Okay, I'm sorry, that was funnier than I expected, because I read it before watching it. And in reading it, I was actually gonna say, look, to be fair to Trump, maybe he's just never heard that tactic before and he's just a little confused by it. That's okay, and he's asking in front of the national audience. I'm not sure that that's the direction I'd go, but you could argue it's earnest, right? Hey, like, could you explain that to me, and how does that work, etc. But when you watch it, no, that's not what was happening. This is what was happening. Okay, show Anna for a second.
So what does that mean? I don't even understand what you mean, show Anna first. What does that mean, show Anna for a second? But does the director have a gun that he can shoot from across the studio in case I have a gun?
Yeah.
Because let me tell you something, that bullet can really shoot through the studio like butter.
So it's one more thing. Upon reading it, I thought, I think maybe he got a little confused, and maybe people are overhyping how confused he got. Upon watching it, I realized it wasn't the confusion as much as he was mad that the proposed solution didn't involve teachers trying to execute the shooter. Like, he's like, where's the gun? I don't want, where's the gun?
But it was strange, he was strangely dismissive of the Attorney General. Curtis Hill, by the way, is his name.
Of Indiana.
Of Indiana, yeah.
Was I the only one thinking there might be a little bit of a racial dynamic there?
It went through my mind.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't make eye contact with him, and I thought it was so incredibly strange. Like, just if you're asking him a question, just make eye contact with him. Talk to him as if he's a human being. Show that you're trying to comprehend what he's telling you.
Yeah.
And he didn't seem to do any of that. By the way, Hill says more states need red flag laws that allow them to take guns away from people they believe to be dangerous. Hill says Indiana is one of only 5 states with a red flag law. It allows police to take guns away from people who present an imminent risk of injury to themselves or others, including people diagnosed with mental illnesses who failed to take prescription medication, or those with a documented history of violent or emotionally unstable behavior. So his suggestions were all about containing this mass shooter, finding a way to distract him from his target, creating certain safeguards. It's just that his solutions didn't provide what Trump wanted, which is more weapons on campus.
I realized as you read that last part too, apparently I'm having a lot of mid-segment epiphanies here. I realized that as you were reading who would not get to have guns, maybe Trump thought, oh, then I wouldn't get to have a gun. Mentally unfit people who were a little unstable.
No, but he passed his dementia test with flying colors, Jay. He's a very stable genius.
He can tell what a rhinoceros looks like. He's nailed it. And again, look, Indiana is not known for being the most liberal state. So it's not like he was dealing with Nancy Pelosi's cousin who came in from San Francisco and is telling him this. It should have been a friendly situation. Mike Pence, his vice president from Indiana, the attorney general of Indiana is here. He's got some proposed solutions that he could brag has worked because his vice president helped to put them in place, whatever, right? But instead, the child heard from an adult and the adult didn't confirm what he wanted to confirm. But I wanted ice cream. Why isn't there any ice cream here?
Yeah,
it's just so sad.
So I'm torn watching that a little bit. We've been talking to a lot of the gun groups in the last couple of days, and one thing I'm kind of detecting is that there's an insider conversation that's happening, and then there's what the people want, which is an assault weapons ban, right? And banning high capacity clips. I think that this red flag law is probably right on the edge. It's probably the boldest thing within the insider speak. But there's so many solutions that are being put on the table that are really not that bold, and part of it is like, well, why doesn't he just accept that? There's gonna be, I guess, canisters in the hallway with smoke coming out to distract the gunman. It's like, okay, that's good. That's not the real solution we need. I mean, that's like the last ditch effort, right?
Right.
So hopefully that's not where the bipartisan consensus lands. So I feel a little tension being like, I kind of want to gang up on him, but also the scope of conversation I want is actually not represented in this conversation right now.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a great point from a policy perspective. And one last thing about it in terms of Trump as president is he doesn't do his homework. So if he had done his homework, he might know what the attorney general was going to say. And he would have a reaction to that and think it through. Like if somebody told me, hey, we're gonna have a conversation with the attorney general of any given state, it's gonna be on national TV, and he's gonna propose a solution. My first question would be, what's the solution? And I'd like to understand that better so I don't get surprised in front of the whole country. Trump, of course, never bothered to read that, never bothered to ask, was totally unprepared. So when he hears it, he's like genuinely surprised, and he keeps thinking like, why isn't he giving me my ice cream? I want guns, I want the teachers to have guns. And you're talking about intelligent solutions here that don't match what I wanted. But if you'd done your homework, you'd already know that. And maybe you could have come up with, look, if you're unhappy with that, you could have canceled it. If you're a Republican out there, you should be maybe mad at him for not canceling it, not doing the homework, or to more effectively challenge him and go, hey, I understand that, but here is my point of view on it, instead of,
yeah, well,
so sad.
Well, we know that the president, who has been applauded as a great deal maker, is actually a terrible deal maker. He's not interested in negotiating. He's not interested in having a conversation. He's interested in getting what he wants, and he's also interested in validation. But to your point, Adam, I hear what you're saying about the insider discussions and how the things being proposed aren't really legitimate solutions that would prevent this from happening again in the future. My issue is that while they're playing patty cakes with one another with these non-solutions, you do have members of the far right who are not holding back in talking about how they want more guns, more guns for teachers, more armed guards on campus. And by the way, I don't think that most Americans have forgotten that there have been multiple cases of school resource officers who have gotten incredibly physical with students, dragging them by their hair, slamming them on the ground whenever they're misbehaving even a little bit. Are you comfortable with your students or your kids going to school with armed guards who could use lethal weapons to respond to incidents like that? I don't know, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
That's a great point. And we see the amount of deference that's given to police officers when they pull someone over for a broken taillight, and then they kill them and the courts let them off. What does that mean for our kids in school?
It's terrifying.
What you just watched was one of the videos that we do today, but we actually do a whole 2-hour show every single day. It's a podcast. You could watch it in video or listen to it as audio. You can download it, you can stream it, and you get it completely ad-free if you could become a member of the Young Turks. tytnetwork.com/join.